I don't know, but what I will say is you just have to put your time horizons on hold and know that over an extended period of time, gold and silver will probably end up being the two most important assets, financial assets that we can own in this country as the dollar starts to really globally lose favor. It is what it is, and it just goes to show that this is a very high stakes game, one that the biggest money in the world is very afraid of letting go of. And but ultimately, you can only manipulate a market or control a market over an extended period of time by pushing in the direction that it is going. And you have the majority of human population pushing back against the West right now. So yeah, it's a dangerous game for these commercial banks who are naked short.
The silver market is experiencing significant changes due to its dual role as an industrial metal and an investment commodity. Industrial demand for silver is rising, accounting for 64% of total consumption. This surge is driven by key sectors such as renewable energy technologies, especially solar energy, electric vehicles, and electronics. Notably, the solar energy sector alone has seen a substantial increase in demand, with photovoltaic capacity additions rising by 20% in 2023. Renowned analyst Andy Schectman highlights an intriguing development: China's unexpected move to purchase unrefined silver concentrate from Latin America. This decision deviates from typical buying patterns and involves China paying significantly higher prices than Western buyers. China is strategically accumulating reserves by refining this silver domestically, suggesting potential supply-demand imbalances. While this accumulation does not immediately affect global prices, it hints at China's long-term strategy to secure silver for future needs, positioning itself as a potentially dominant force in the market. Meanwhile, the traditional control exerted by central and commercial banks over the silver market appears to be weakening. Historically, these banks have manipulated prices by allowing them to rise to attract speculative interest, only to suppress them for profit later. However, as inventories on major exchanges dwindle and demand for physical silver remains robust, the bank's ability to maintain large short positions becomes increasingly precarious. This evolving scenario suggests that the prolonged suppression of silver prices may be nearing a pivotal turning point. As genuine supply and demand dynamics begin to assert themselves more prominently, we may witness a market where prices are determined more by these fundamental forces.
The massive acquisition of silver that we see coming out of China and India cannot be ignored. And why would they bitch about it if they're the ones doing all the accumulation? And they are. And you know, there was some interesting revelations that came out of some interviews that Chris Marcus has done recently, and Vince Lancy, with some mining executives who are talking about the fact that China is buying unrefined silver concentrate from Latin American refiners and miners. This is something that's really rarely, if ever, done, and it is typically only done in times of very acute supply-demand imbalances. It's the way they talk about it, and that they are way overpaying by many, many times the amount that for each ton of unrefined silver that the West would pay for it, and they're bringing it home to China, refining it there. It has no impact on the price of silver. I think it gives pause in terms of price, in terms of where we are ultimately going. Yeah, the central banks and the commercial banks rather are still in control, but it's becoming very dangerous. And you're seeing the bleed down in all of the exchanges. We've talked about that. You're seeing the import numbers. But you're also seeing something like this, that it isn't very easy to see this, but that they're paying as much as $200 a ton more for each load of the material. That's on a per ton basis. That's a lot more, and they are refining it themselves in China, similar to the way that China said they weren't accumulating gold during the last few months, but they were, and they're buying it through proxy banks that work on behalf of the PBOC, who don't report it to the IMF. These countries who are using the suppression of the Western paper market against us, they're not causing a stink, and why would they? But what they are doing is standing for delivery and taking it any way that they can. We saw more of the same, the managed money get fleeced again, and one of these days it's not going to happen. One of these days the commercial banks will be on the right side of the trade. Maybe that's where they're going right now, because there's such insatiable demand, physical demand for delivery. To be on the wrong side of that trade at the wrong time is a death sentence. And one of these days, I think they will hoodwink the managed money into going short. And that's kind of what you see right now, where almost $5 billion in long futures were sold by the managed money here last week, and almost $2 billion in silver futures sold. We'll find out more, I think, tomorrow with the COT numbers. It'll probably be much bigger than that. But what you are seeing is what we've always seen. The commercial banks allow the price to rise. They absorb all the buying pressure. They suck in all the speculators, and then they step on the price and lean on it and lean on it and lean on it after they've absorbed all the buying, and they rinse, wash, and repeat, and you end up fleecing the managed money who capitulates. But one of these days, when the managed money gives up, goes short, and sells all their longs, that means when they go short and sell their longs, the commercial banks take the other side of both trades, both of the short trade going long and selling their longs to the commercial banks. And that's what will happen. And I don't know when that will be, but I think that what differentiates this time from all the other times is that we're seeing such a massive bleed down. You look at the LBMA numbers, they're down to the lowest level they've ever had since they started keeping records. And it's just a matter of time before the deliveries continue to, I think, create a problem where being naked short the amount that they are is about as foolish as it can get. So, yeah, I understand the frustration. It's still much higher than it was a year ago, but breaking that 30 barrier, I think, was a gut punch to a lot of people. Ultimately, it will retest those numbers again.
For decades, the US dollar has dominated the global financial landscape, serving as the primary reserve currency, the main unit of account, and the leading medium of exchange. Its influence in international transactions has seemed unassailable. However, this dominance may be shifting. Recently, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen pointed out an emerging global move away from the dollar. This shift is driven by concerns over America's massive $34 trillion debt and the repercussions of US-imposed sanctions. Simultaneously, the BRICS nations, led by China and Russia, are actively working to undermine the dollar's supremacy. The rise of cryptocurrencies further weakens the dollar's stronghold. This global transition signifies a profound change in investment strategies and future planning, with a growing number of investors turning to commodities like gold and silver to hedge against the instability of fiat currencies. Unlike stocks or bonds, investing in precious metals is not about rapid gains but about safeguarding wealth over the long term. Andy Schectman foresees a time when the current artificial suppression of these metals will cease, leading to a dramatic increase in their value. This evolving financial landscape highlights the importance of diversifying investments and staying informed about the shifting dynamics of global currencies and precious metals.
Is I know that the majority of human population is accumulating commodities. I know that the majority of human population understands that currencies inherently are meant to die, especially those that are fiat. Ultimately, they always die. They return to their intrinsic value of worthlessness, of zero, of paper. And the slow accumulation by these sophisticated commercial central banks, sovereign wealth funds, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who don't have the time frame to play the long game. You know, the old saying that the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent is true. You know, you accumulate this stuff because you see the big picture. And as frustrating as it is, you have to understand you're not buying it to become wealthy overnight. You're buying it because it is wealth. And ultimately, Mother Nature wins. You cannot suppress and continue to manipulate a market that is enticing massive global demand. It's as if I think instant gratification has become so ingrained in the American psyche that it's too difficult to deal with. I don't ever lament when the price goes down or when the price goes up. I'm not overly joyful. I just understand that over time, gold and silver will do what it's done for all of time, and that is to retain its purchasing power. But in particular, at the end of this macro system that we are in, it will go from 0 to 100 very quickly in terms of its speed. And what seemed like an eternity in being, stuck in a quagmire of confusion and disconnect from reality. Like, why would it not be going higher in this environment? You have to understand you have 8 commercial banks with a tremendous amount of power that are suppressing silver to the degree of the largest concentrated short position in the history of the COMEX. Why? I have my own beliefs. I really do believe it has to do with the amount of silver used in the military industrial complex, that these are very powerful players that don't want to let the price of silver get away, but the rest of the world doesn't care what they want. And when you see India and China doing what they are doing, using the suppression of price to accumulate and continue to drain and to do it methodically, it will reach a point where the realization of being on the wrong side of this trade is a death sentence. And I do believe that. And I think they understand that already. Maybe guys like Elon Musk already understand that. Maybe they're the ones, or he's one of the ones that have been standing for delivery here in the West. I don't know, but what I will say is you just have to put your time horizons on hold and know that over an extended period of time, gold and silver will probably end up being the 2 most important assets as the dollar starts to really globally lose favor. And I think that's going to happen in an accelerated fashion at some point. What starts out as a trickle can very quickly turn into a flood. And I know it's frustrating. I do. I get it. I'm frustrated even having to talk about it all the time. But, it is what it is. And it just goes to show that this is a very high stakes game, one that the biggest money in the world is very afraid of letting go of. And but ultimately, you can only manipulate a market or control a market over an extended period of time by pushing the direction that it is going. And you have the majority of human population pushing back against the West right now. So, yeah, it's a dangerous game for these commercial banks who are naked short.